What happened elsewhere? Well, the game I was at was Iowa State. And the Hawkeyes win 27-17. I'd love to do an extended breakdown on this, but it really isn't warranted. All you need to know is the padlock stat. Probably the most standout padlock stat in any major game yesterday was this one, -4 turnovers for Iowa State. Or, alternately, you could say 4 turnovers forced by Iowa. However you want to look at that, no one's winning this game at -4 turnovers. It was a miracle that it was even a 10-point game at the end. And so Kirk Ferentz is a veteran, man. I mean, that's a pro's pro when it comes to college coaches. That is a pro's pro. Because there was no gimmick about Iowa yesterday. There was no hype. That was all on the Cyclone side. I was a part of it. I participated actively, willingly. Wasn't crazy about the black jerseys, but I was going to let it ride because that's your program. That's not my program. But red and yellow is a hard color combo to screw up. Jersey colors didn't lose the game yesterday. What I'm saying is Kirk Ferentz did something that is so veteran and so savvy. With all that hype, he just sat back and he watched it, and he almost stroked his chin and said, against that veteran team in a hornet's nest of a stadium and game day in town and all the trappings, I'm going to walk in there and we're just going to sit and wait for them to hand the game to us. We're not even going to overly be aggressive. We're just going to go in there and play our brand, and they'll give us the game. And Iowa went in there, and they took, in retrospect, what was the most sound and shrewd approach that you could take in that game yesterday. They sat in Jack Trice Stadium, and they just waited. They might as well have propped their foot up on their knee, and Iowa State turned it over and turned it over and turned it over and turned it over. And Iowa did just enough. I mean, there was a 339 to 173 yardage edge in favor of the Cyclones. There was a 4.8 to 2.9 yards per play edge, Cyclones. And yet Iowa puts 27 on the board. Didn't even accumulate 180 yards total offense, and they put 27 on the board. And so now we have to ask about Iowa, because this is 2 weeks in a row that turnovers and points off turnovers have led to emphatic wins. And you start to ask that question. Is it sustainable? Do they just continue to do that all year long? I will tell you this. We have seen years where teams do that. They're not +4 every week, but we have seen years where teams finish +10 or +15 turnover margin, and it's just a staple of the formula that they use. Iowa plays good complementary ball. They're not fragmented. Everything works in unison on that team. And so now people are talking playoff. It's way premature to talk like that. They are a team that understands perfectly what their identity is. They don't try and be anything they're not. They are, though, a team that's very dangerous. And they'll sit there and they'll back themselves into a corner, and then you'll start reaching in there, and then they'll bite you. Don't reach. That's the secret. Don't reach. But it's really hard. I know it's really tempting. So congratulations to Iowa. That was not an easy place to play yesterday, and they went in there and took control. There was never a time where Iowa State could fully get that crowd into it, because there was never a time where they jumped ahead and grabbed momentum. There was never a time it happened. So congratulations to Iowa. Good trip, though. It's the best trip I've taken. I've never been treated better than the folks, both sides now, treated me in Iowa. That was a great time yesterday. I'm very, very much looking for an excuse to get back up there. Penn State at Iowa down the road, who knows? Michigan 31, Washington 10. Let me tell you one thing you're not going to do. You will never, this year at least, question the identity of Michigan's offense. It may not be the offense you all thought you would get when you hired Josh Gattis a couple of years ago, but they've got an identity. 3-touchdown win here. How about these numbers? 44 yards passing, not a padlock stat, because if I told you Michigan was going to have 44 through the air, you would have thought crushing defeat. Nope, because the follow-up is 343 on the ground. There was a 15-56 run-to-pass ratio in this game for Michigan. That's an identity. It's called sledgehammer. That's the identity. It's pretty obvious. I think they said it in the broadcast last night. It's pretty obvious. At some point over the summer, Jim Harbaugh went to Josh Gattis and said, all these pass plays, yeah, forget it. Here's what we're going to do. It's like Herman Boone. I run 6 plays like Novocaine. Just give it time, it'll work. This was not an immediate pull away. It was a 4-quarter wear you down, lean on you, eventually you crumble. I mean, I credit Washington for even standing up as much as they did. Washington's a good team, but you can't just keep getting pounded on like that. It's not going to happen. Washington's 0-2 now. They are one of my favorite teams this week. We're going to do Ramen Noodle Express in just a second. Washington's a 14.5-point favorite against Ark State. Looks like a terrible line. We love Washington. Love them this week. Horrible matchup for Arkansas State, the least of which is they have to fly to Olympia, Washington. But we love Arkansas State. We love Washington over Arkansas State this week. We'll get to that in just a second. Pitt beats Tennessee 41-34. I got some very interesting feedback on this game. You know, Director Colin is my resident Tennessee insider. So I always ask him, what do I need to know about that Tennessee game? And I wanted to see if Director Colin was going to tell me what other Tennessee fans told me. Because I was obviously not at this game. I was not able to watch it live, but I was getting a lot of feedback. And a lot of Tennessee fans that I'm buddies with, they kept texting me and they kept saying, you know, eventually when they lost the game, we lost the game, we hate that, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of encouragement. And that's rare. Because most of the time the sky's falling when Tennessee loses, according to these guys at least. So Colin walks in tonight, and I asked him, how'd you feel? I know the final, I know the outcome, we all know that. How did you feel? He said, you know, I mean, I hate losing, but I liked a lot of what I saw. That was a theme yesterday. That's rare. I've wanted to point that out because you don't hear that most of the time from a losing side. They hate losing, but they're still encouraged by what they saw. They were down several players to start the game. They lost more players during the game. Pitt's average age is like 30, and so there was a roster advantage in favor of Pitt. Let me just say that. What lost this game for Tennessee, as I went back and watched it, is something I don't say very often. I really think officiating disproportionately impacted Tennessee in this game. But I'm not going to call that the reason they lost. Now, you could argue with me if we changed some calls here and there in a one-possession game, maybe it changes the outcome. But when I look at Stat Broadcast, which is a service we use, and I see 13 penalties for over 130 yards, that lost you the game. I'm willing to guarantee it. That lost you the game. So there is a lot in this sport that may be outside of your control. If a guy blows a call on you, he blows a call. But there was an old Little League coach by the name of Dan Pate that coached the Catawba Mudcats back in the day. And we went 1-15 our first year, but rattled off 3 consecutive league championships the year after. And one of the reasons, among many, is because we got taught umpires or officials can only cost you a game if you put them in position to cost you a game. If you let an official break your heart, they will break your heart. Tennessee put the game in position for officials to break their heart, and they got their heart broken. But there was a lot of encouragement. There is a lot to build on. There's a long, long way to go. Don't mistake me. It's not like they're on the precipice of something enormous, but there was some encouragement. And at the very least, like we said at the beginning of the year, when Tennessee loses games this year, they're going to go down with no bullets in the chamber. It's not going to be like a 13-9 rock fight where, you know, they get stopped inside the 20-yard line 4 times. This is not that kind of team anymore. So at the very least, when you lose, we thought this was what it was going to sound like. Yeah, we lost, but there were some encouraging signs. Now you got to build on it. I thought the most fascinating under-the-radar game of the entire week was being played in Lexington, Kentucky. And sure enough, it delivered. Kentucky 35, Missouri 28. Huge win. I think an underrated win right now in the East, but a huge win for Kentucky. And there is probably a difference in what you think happened versus what really happened. Because there's a new perception about Kentucky, and that is they're going to throw it all over the place. And long term, I think they may be committed to that. But Mark Stoops is still one of the most veteran head coaches around, and he understands that styles make fights and matchups are how you win games. And they looked at Missouri, and they thought, we're going to have to run the ball, and we're going to have to run it a lot. And as much as I told you that Michigan-Washington game was tilted in run-pass, think about this. Kentucky, you may think they threw the ball all over Missouri. A lot of you didn't watch this game. 18 runs, 50, or let me reverse that. It's probably what you thought happened. They threw the ball 18 times. They ran it 52 times. 340 yards on the ground, 6.5 per carry. That's pretty heavily tilted. That's an identity in a game. But it's very important, man. It's a huge win in the SEC East because you think you know how the East is going to shake out. You think you know Georgia's going to win it. I think they're going to win it. You think you know Florida will finish runner-up, but you don't know that. Because I think there's a gap there right now. And so there is probably some competition to be had at that number 2 spot. Now, Florida has a very high ceiling on them. We've, in a lot of ways, still yet to see it this year. Very excited about Anthony Richardson. Very excited. Notice the quarterback's name I mentioned is not QB1 right now. But for all we know, as I said last week, the winner of this game could end up finishing second in the East. Crazier things have happened. And in a Renaissance year, which we are very much in the throes of, just keep this game in mind is all I'm saying. Texas A&M won, against Colorado. That was expected. Winning with 10 points was not expected. True story here. Yesterday, I'm on the sideline at the Iowa State game, and as is usually the case during the commercial breaks, they're scrolling scores over the banners and the ribbon screens and the scoreboard. And the A&M game keeps popping up. And it says 7-3 Colorado, fourth quarter. Then it said 10-7 A&M, fourth quarter. The assumption on the sideline amongst all the assembled media and everyone else is that score's messed up. All the rest of them look right, but there's a glitch in the A&M score. We don't really know what the score is. That was the assumption. I agreed. That's how off this game was. It was right. There was no glitch. So good to the tech crew in Ames, Iowa. They had the right score up. 10-7 was the final. A&M was favored by 17. There were 17 total points scored in the game. Crazy. Obviously, there were some extenuating circumstances here. Haynes King went down, starting quarterback for A&M. Does not look like he'll be able to go this week. That's not official, at least as of recording. But there's a lot of doom and gloom. But I want to say something. There is value in winning a game. Now, don't think there's not. I know that I say a lot of times, you're more than just what your record says you are, but you better win these. And there was a time a few years back in 2014, I remember Alabama won one of the ugliest games from an aesthetic standpoint in the Nick Saban era. They beat Arkansas 14-13. And you've heard Saban this week. He's aggravated about everything when they're blowing folks out. I've never heard Nick Saban more demonstrative in his defense of his team than when they won 14-13. Because he knew they had won an ugly game. They had won a game in a different style than they were used to winning. And he was proud of them. Because you got to be able to do that. You don't win with your fastball 14 or 15 games in a row. You've got to have secondary pitches. You've got to have tertiary pitches. Well, Alabama won with their changeup that day. Texas A&M yesterday won with their cut fastball. They won with their slider. They had to do something else. This is not a marquee opponent. It was not a marquee game. It was off a lot of radars. They found a way to win a game, and that's what matters. And they did it with their backup quarterback in Zach Calzada, and that's the guy they'll probably have to roll with this week. They're playing New Mexico. And that's the last game they have before they enter conference play against Arkansas in 2 weeks in Dallas. Very much bears watching, because I think Texas A&M is one of my favorite teams this week too. I love playing on teams when the quarterback's out. I love it. It has been a staple of this program. We have profited extremely well off of playing on backup quarterbacks. More on that in a second. The last thing I wanted to show you, I have not wrapped my head around it yet. There's stuff that happens in college football. It would only happen in this sport. Look at that lower third. I got to know who came up with that afterwards. I am not creative enough to come up with the lower third, which says, by the way, Miami beats App State by a whisker. I know good and well most of you weren't watching this game yesterday, and I wasn't either. There was an occurrence that happened in this game that I swear to you could only happen in college football. This would never happen in Euro soccer. It would never happen in NASCAR. It would never happen in Major League Baseball or NFL. There's just some stuff that happens in this sport that is so unique to college football, it almost brings a tear to your eye. And so the scene yesterday, I've got the video for you, because I would not blame you if you didn't believe me if I just described this to you. In the middle of the Miami App State game yesterday, there is a cat that is hanging from the upper deck by its claws. You're looking at it right now. That is a live cat hanging. And then the cat lets go with one claw remaining. And then the cat plummets to what looks like a certain death, except there are guys, because of 9/11, with an American flag draped out, and they catch it like a rescue net. This is the best part. Then the guy who caught the cat extends him above the mob like Simba in The Lion King, and the place explodes. They went crazy, like Miami had just scored a walk-off touchdown. Guys, the game's happening. This is not a commercial break. The game's happening on the field, and this cat is dangling by one claw. And then the cat drops. Look at everybody. They caught him with an American flag, and then the guy doesn't know what to do. And so what else do you do other than raise him like Simba, like the Lion King? Look at those people jumping up and down. Where else does that happen? What other sport does that happen in? That's the most bizarre, surreal, but makes perfect sense video that you could ever show someone that is a stranger to college football to describe college football. Do you understand that as this was happening, Southern Miss was playing a game? I kid you not. Most of you probably don't know this. They had to shut down one of the tunnels at the Southern Miss game because a lady had a baby in the tunnel. Right there. Had a baby in the stadium. I don't know how you rework the attendance figures. I got a lot of questions, to be honest with you, about having the baby in the stadium. But they had a cat almost, feline, I don't know what we would call that. It's a rescue. That's what it was. It was a God Bless America rescue because an American flag was used in lieu of an actual safety net. And then we had a lady give birth. What a renaissance year it is indeed in college football. So that was what they told you was going to be a sleeper week. Yeah, that was the week you could go and have your fall wedding. Well, no, that's a trick question because you can never have a fall wedding at the right Saturday.